we talk about the future, and I'm not just talking about India, but the future for Bata globally as well, how big are you going to be, for instance, on acquisitions, especially when it comes to trying to sort of enhance brand value, also product capability?
Mm-hmm. Well, our growth agenda is composed of two planks. One is organic and one is inorganic. The organic plank is going to be the majority of our growth expectations, I think, for obvious reasons. We believe that with our brand portfolio and our retail banner portfolio, because we have quite a few retail banners. We have Bata, we have Bubble Gummers, we have Winebrenner, we have AW Lab, which is a sportswear banner. So we have a few banners.
The brand banners that you just talked about, how many of those will we see you bring into India, the ones that are not here already?
We will be experimenting, right? As you know, in retail, you can't predict rollout potential as you would in a brand in itself. So we will be experimenting with a few of those.
What seems promising at this point?
I'm not going to divulge it because it's still quite confidential at this stage and it's quite sensitive information. But there are two banners that we have today that might seem to have potential in India when you look at the demographics of the country. And we'll be experimenting with those in 2017. And if they are promising, we will be rolling them out in 2018.
In 2017 or 2018?
We'll experiment 2017.
Okay.
And we'll be rolling them out in 2018 if they indeed prove that they actually in tune with the potential we had foreseen.
Let me ask you then a question on your e-commerce aspirations in India. What has been the learning so far from what you've seen other brands do in this market? And how much would you be betting on e-commerce going forward?
Our e-commerce strategy is to meet our consumers' need wherever she chooses to shop. If she wants to buy online, we will serve her online. If she wants to buy in the store, we will serve her in the store. But remember that the most important thing about the digital revolution is not only e-commerce. It is internet influence purchasing behavior. Because even, by the way, e-commerce in footwear in India is less than 1%.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's insignificant today. And we are 3%. So we are still small, but well ahead of the market. But the challenge is twofold in that. First is, how do you master the digital equation to make sure that you influence all your purchases through your digital tools and your communication tools, whether it's on your own platforms, on third-party platforms, in the content that you bring to consumer, and in your ability to be part of their conversation. Because one thing is clear, that in any market in the world, and now, by the way, India is becoming the number 2 largest internet market consumer in the world, 90% of sales are now influenced by the internet, even when they are online. So that one dimension is really important when you think about e-commerce, a lot more about as what proportion of my sales are in e-commerce. The second one is, I know of myself, even when I buy a tie, before I go to a store, if I don't have a lot, I check out whether they have more or less what I like, and vice versa. I'm sure you do the same. And the second one is, how do you make sure that your online sales are not margin dilutive? Because frankly, any idiot can sell online. It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
Yes.
But selling online and losing your shirt is not that smart either.
No, it's not.
And unfortunately, many fashion retailers have an online business which is massively margin dilutive. And we don't want to do that. So we want to grow. We want to meet the consumer's need online. We want to influence all their purchases appropriately, but we want to do it in a profit-disciplined way.
So since you're talking about being profit-disciplined and not being margin dilutive, for investors who've been invested in Bata in India, what is your message to them? Give us some sort of guidance in terms of, you gave us an aspirational number of wanting to touch $1 billion over the next few years, but in terms of the margin story, in terms of profitability, what kind of growth are you factoring in?
I'm not going to give you guidance beyond of what was given in the latest release, right? But one thing is clear, is we are very committed to profitable growth. I've never been a believer of, let's just go for volume, put candles in church or in the temple and hope something happens on the margin. I don't believe in that, because it almost inevitably never happens. Growth needs to be disciplined, and growth in top line needs to be accompanied by gradual margin expansion. And we have, by now, on a global level, made enormous progress in margin expansion. Over the course of the past year, we have expanded margin by almost 2 full points. So we're increasingly confident of our ability to have much more attractive margins down the road. And that is coming from two sources. Number one is gross margin. Because we're having more successful collections, people are willing to spend a little bit more. We're having to have a little bit less markdowns. And we are becoming more professional in managing markdowns, which mechanically drives you to have wider gross margins. Second, on operating expenses, we will be focusing a lot more on what I call the muscle and the strategic capabilities needed for the company, which are marketing, product, and retail. These are our three core capabilities. Everything else is not necessarily supposed to be a competitive advantage, and we'll have to be quite cost conscious in order to make sure that our operating expenses stay in check as we continue developing these three core capabilities, which are needed for us to get to our vision in 5 years.
So what can we expect then in terms of investments into India over the next few years?
I think you should expect quite a bit of investment at every front. India is a top priority market. You will have investment in human resources. You're going to have investment in including, which leads to employment, much larger real estate park, much more online capabilities, and much more marketing activity, which has its own ecosystem around it from an economic standpoint. When you talk about the media, when you talk about journalism, when you talk about opportunities for young designers, that will carry a whole little ecosystem with it when it starts happening.
Can I tie you down to a number?
No.
No? I thought I'd give it a last shot. Okay, so let me end then by asking you, Alexis, I mean, you've spoken about how confident you feel about the India story, what you're doing in India to be able to drive growth. What would be the single biggest factor that you would be most concerned about outside what you cannot control, which is economic shocks that the government may throw your way, but outside of that, what would be your biggest concern while doing business in India?
I mean, from the areas that we control, I think I wouldn't call it a concern, I would call it a challenge, which is how do we evolve without throwing the baby out with the bathwater? That is, I think, getting that balance right is our number one challenge. We never will want to become a complete fashion freak label. That's not what we are, and that's not what we want to be.
How much do the accessories contribute now, for instance, to the business?
Rough number, it's about 10%.
10%. Where do you see that headed?
We don't have particular views on what percentage it ought to accommodate. As a percentage of our business, it is about the right range, but what is more important is that accessories need to be margin sweetening. That is their role in our portfolio, and they are currently, and I think they could be even more in the future. But getting the balance right of evolving the company to be more aspirational to young consumers, to be more female relevant, to be more modern, while staying faithful and serving our core constituency, which composes 99% of our sales today, is going to be the balancing act that we have to get right. Because fashion retailers that swing left and right, I have a name for it in footwear, it's called flip-flopping. People who flip-flop.
I like flip-flops, though.
I love flip-flops. I don't like flip-flopping. So flip-flopping is very dangerous for this business. Unfortunately, very often fashion retailers tend to flip-flop. We don't want to do that. We want to evolve, but with a firm and steady hand.
So the premium products in your portfolio, let's say over the next 2 or 3 years, how much would they contribute to revenues?
I couldn't tell you exactly how much they contribute in India to our revenue today, but I wouldn't be surprised if their contribution to our total revenue doubles or triples in the next 3 years.
Doubles or triples?
Yeah.
On that note, then, we wish you the very best of luck. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Appreciate your time, and good luck with your plans here as well as globally. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC TV 18 special from all of us here. Goodbye, and many thanks for watching.